starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, a very good morning to you from sunny California. My name is Simon Thompson. I'm the technical evangelist here at Cisco Meraki. And today we have a very special webinar for you. And this is a brand new series we are launching this quarter. And we are calling it the Meraki Quarterly. So this is going to be the first one of these. And the idea is that at the beginning of each quarter, we will bring you an update from each of our product teams with the current status of the various different products in the portfolio. So it's a really different kind of webinar to the ones that you may have heard of from Meraki previously. We think it's going to be very useful to you to give you a nice snapshot of where we are with the Meraki family, because as I'm sure you know, if you've been following what we're doing or you're already a customer, we are constantly iterating and adding new features to all of our product lines. This makes it a very exciting portfolio to work with, certainly from our perspective. We do understand, though, of course, that for customers, it can be a little bit challenging to keep on top of all of the changes that are coming at you. So this is why we thought it would be useful to introduce this webinar series. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that we also have a full webinar program. So if you haven't come across Meraki before, if this is the first time that you've joined us, then it really is worth your while to go along to the website at the top of this screen. We have an extensive range of webinars in multiple languages, and we run these multiple times throughout the week in different time zones. So it's really a great opportunity for you to get on and understand what we're doing. And we have some specialized webinars as well, so sometimes we'll get into specific product areas, or we'll start to look at specific verticals, as you can see on the screen here. Now, I am joined today by a couple of colleagues, and this means that we can get some help with question and answers during the course of this webinar. I expect it will probably take us around 45 minutes today, so we'll see how we go for time. But if you have a question, you can just use the tool on the right-hand side of your screen to ask that at any time, and we'll try and get that answered for you as quickly as possible. All right, so let's get straight into the detail, and I'm very happy to say that today we have a guest joining us from the product team, and he is the product manager for our security portfolio. So I'm going to hand you over to Dehan Altus, who will take you through the update from the security family.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for the very nice introduction, and I must say I'm impressed. Most people mispronounce my name, and you did a perfect job, so what a nice treat. All right, so what I want to do is cover a couple things. So like Simon said, if you're joining this webinar for the very first time and you never had any exposure to Meraki products, this may give you some exciting ideas, but ultimately the webinar is targeted for existing customers or partners who actually know the baseline product functionality, and they're looking for, hey, what has changed in the last couple of months? So I sort of compiled the things that we have added to the product in the last couple of months, and I can actually give you guys a quick demo if I can, assuming that Simon's machine has the login and etc. So we'll get to that. But here are the differences. So we are now pushing the geography-based firewall rules to production release. So if you haven't gotten the notification about production firmware updates, you please go ahead and look at your applying settings, or in your like the administration page. You should see that an update is available now. And if you do get the update, you will see that now you can actually do layer 7 firewall rules, and you can start denying countries. North Korea has been mentioned prominently in the last couple of weeks, so I figured I'd just throw it out there. So this would be one simple example of like trying to block rogue actors or states. The other thing that we've added is the NAT mode HA. So the HA in the NAT mode is now going live in production. So essentially what's going to happen is that now you can combine two firewalls, and I just want to remind people that our HA integration for now is going to be active passive, and it's VRRP based, and so that's available in production. A third update we did is on the security signatures and how frequently they get updated. So obviously we want them to get updated as frequently as possible, but there is a use case where, for example, if you're primarily running on cellular on a sort of a backup mode, then updates sometimes tend to create bandwidth usage, and which in turn results in added dollars for your cellular overage. So now there is a way to control how frequently the updates are going to occur, and you essentially can You do it on an hourly basis, daily, or weekly basis. Obviously, if your budget permitting, would encourage you to keep the updates as frequent as possible so that you get the latest antivirus, intrusion prevention, and content filtering updates along with firmware updates. Also, licensed a little convenient tool about DHCP leases. So many of you who have very large networks and have a lot of DHCP clients, if in the past you have some DHCP pool saturation, not only you can actually create alerts about that in the alerts page, but you can also in real time look at how many leases you have and which ones are about to expire and things like that. The other interesting, I would say, sort of a sophisticated, I want to call this kind of a connoisseur's feature, is that we now allow you to have VLAN objects for creating firewall rules. This is live for specifically template-based networks. So the way it works is that if you have a template-based network, and if you don't know templates, it really is a sort of a really cool new UI feature we've launched, which allows you to, rather than manage one network at a time, create a blueprint template so that you can have a bunch of networks following that template. So it's really what the name implies. It's sort of a template that a bunch of firewalls follow. And one of the issues there is that since every different firewall may have a different IP address or a different subnet behind them, it is sort of difficult to create a firewall rule that wouldn't use a generic network object. So we said, hey, what better than using the VLAN names as native network objects? So if you can see from this picture, and I will demonstrate this stuff, but basically if you look at this picture, you'll see that I have a bunch of VLANs. In this case, I have a VLAN called VoIP, another VLAN called guest, and the name is here, and we're going to use those names as built-in native objects so that you can say, hey, I just want to block traffic from VoIP VLAN to the guest VLAN. Now, regardless of the actual network IP address of these VLANs in a given network, let's say you have a retail installation with 100 different locations, and every location have a different IP range, CIDR range, it wouldn't matter as long as the sort of the master template has this tag-based or the kind of object-based firewall rules. Every location will have the proper firewall capability. So this is really exciting, specifically if you're using the templates feature. Another feature we've done is improvements on the third-party VPN front. So we made two improvements. I want to talk about those. The first one is that now you can customize the IPsec policy. So if you can see the first blue arrow, rather than just kind of going through a limited subset of IPsec policies, now we have created a sort of few default policies that you can choose from. One of them is being Azure, the other one is AWS, or you can just click on custom and you can really customize the phase 1 and phase 2 policies for encryption, authentication, etc. So this really expands our third-party VPN interoperability to a much larger set, specifically if you're dealing with partners or other organizations where you have no way of sort of influencing their third-party or their VPN connectivity parameters. So now we are becoming a lot more flexible in interoperating with those VPN parties. Now, equally, if not more importantly, is the way we've re-architected the VPN third-party VPN connectivity graph. So if you look at this screenshot here, you'll see that there's a portion at the sort of like the right-hand side that says availability pull-down menu, and there are a bunch of tags there. So now we allow you to essentially, not only talk to every, from every MX to a specific third-party device. You can actually choose which devices participate in the VPN, and this is the quote-unquote the tag-based third-party VPN settings. So in the past, if you wanted to talk to AWS, by default, all MXs would try to establish a connection. And in some cases, that's desirable, but in many cases, there are limitations with that. Now, with the new tag-based VPN capability, third-party VPN capability, you can tag your devices, and only the devices that are tagged with a specific tag will participate in that VPN setting. So this is actually already documented in docs.meraki.com, so this feature is live and available. But the punchline is it really helps you refine and in fact confine which devices are participating in the VPN tunnel. So I think this is the part of the MX product updates. I'm going to ask Simon to log me to the dashboard from his computer so I can actually show you some of these cool features. All right, looks like we're logged in. This is great. And can you see my screen? I'm looking at my colleague. Perfect. So I'm going to go to the Meraki core. And I'm going to show you and these couple things. First, the live tools. I want to show you the geography-based firewall rules and a few other things. And I'm looking at my colleague who has a note for me. Yeah, so the question is, for the country blocking option, will it block if the end user is spoofing the other country's IP address, or are they using some sort of a VPN product? No, obviously, if they're establishing a VPN tunnel, your best bet is to effectively block that tunnel using a traffic shaping or a layer 7 application firewall, or even just like that VPN traffic tends to be on UDP ports, so it isn't extremely hard many times to sort of detect that. But you can use content filtering, for example, to block access to things like a VPN host based on a URL. So I would say that it's a bit of a cat and mouse game. So you would need to look at the network traffic to understand if you can intercept that VPN log through either UDP ports or the URL destination of that VPN sort of a gateway or layer 7 traffic routes. But let me start by showing some of these features. First, I'm going to show you is the traffic analytics, where we now have information about the country. So let me just go to the engineering network where we have this information up and running. Here we go. And on the traffic analytics, you can see that now we report the country information. So obviously, this is for the last day. If you look at the last month, we're going to see a lot more exciting stuff. So you can see all the countries that have been accessed from this. Sorry, it's not my laptop, so I'm fat fingering a little bit, but should be still fairly obvious. Here you go. The country information is here, so you can sort by country. And in the addition to that, now that you have the country information, you can sort of act on it. What you can do is you can go to Configure, Firewall, and you can create a firewall rule here. Let's see. Country, and boom, you can block by country. Or you can actually do the reverse. You can say, hey, I don't want to block one country at a time. I have a very restrictive network. Say you're a retailer and you say, I don't want traffic to go anywhere but to stay in North America, or say just the United States in general. So you can actually do that too. So you can say, deny any traffic that is not from United States. So that way you have a far more restrictive content. So this is one thing I wanted to demonstrate. The second thing I wanted to demonstrate is the VPN enhancements. So let's go to the site-side VPN page. I don't think this device participates in the site-side VPN, so we'll just navigate to one that actually does. Let's say, and also I'm going to take this banner away. Great. So let's go to Meraki Core Network. Here we go. So in this VPN page, should load up on your end very promptly. You can scroll to the bottom, and in the third-party VPN settings right here, you can see that now we have more capability. So I can add a new peer, and when I add this new peer, I can just say, hey, this is just going to be an AWS. So we went ahead and basically punched in the AWS settings already, so you don't have to worry about that. And also, you can actually choose which networks should participate in this third-party VPN peer. So as you know, in dashboard on the organization overview page, you can tag your network, so you can say franchises versus corporate, or headquarter versus like a European installation and things like that. And based on that, you can actually decide which network should participate in that third-party VPN connectivity. So these two settings are new, along with the previous one, which I showed for my country-based firewalling rule. The other interesting thing we've done, which I think is worth mentioning quickly, is on the traffic shaping page. As I mentioned, now you can essentially decide how long, how frequently you want to update your lists. So I'm going to let that load. Here we go. So for example, as you can see, we can actually say, hey, just download everything hourly, or we can say, hey, in details, I want to basically configure this because maybe you have a cellular backup strategy, and your cellular backup is going to be somewhat costly because you're not supposed to run on that for a very long time. So maybe what you say is that, hey, when I fail over the cellular, I just want to do it on a weekly basis because I cannot afford to pay all these overages. So that's how you can configure the list update intervals. And lastly, before I just pass it back to Simon, I want to show the template capability that we've added. So the templates are really just a good way to essentially manage a bunch of networks. So if you look at our Meraki core organization, we have 31 teleworkers, and we manage them through a single teleworker template. But this doesn't have to be just for teleworkers. This can be many of our customers. In fact, one of our largest customers are using templates to manage 12,000 branches. So this is a really great way to scale. And what you do is that you essentially create a template and attach a bunch of devices to that template. So one of the things I wanted to show here is that when you want to configure the template, it looks just like a firewall. It's just that it doesn't have anything to monitor because it itself is sort of a sort of fictitious entity. So it doesn't have a physical meaning. It's just a logical grouping, and you create all these rules and all these firewall capabilities, and every device you attach to this template will get those settings. One of the things that we've added is in the firewall page, because in every individual device may have a different IP address, so it's really, really hard to put a firewall rule based on IP source and destination. That would be an actual kind of a physical IP address because every device is different. So that's why we've gone ahead and added a way for you to essentially select your VLANs. So it looks like in these, the actual template, if I can actually show the template, you'll see that the template has two VLANs. It has a VLAN called Home, and it has a template VLAN called Corp. Based on that, I can essentially create either a VLAN-based a firewall rule or a host-based firewall rule. Basically, I can say, like maybe I'm going to deny everything, and I can say deny everything, but allow home.1 to talk to guest or corp.2. So this would be one way I can selectively have one host from one VLAN to another host from the other, and it's generic. So if my VLAN IP changes, it doesn't matter. The firewall rule updates itself. So that's why it's elegant, it's dynamic, and it actually kind of gives you a very, very sort of a concise way of putting firewall rules, which will sort of like, the word I don't want to use, but I guess I will, is polymorphic. So these rules will actually change and apply to the specific VLAN based on where the template is instantiated. A lot of fancy words, but actually the ultimate feature is fairly simple to grasp and to use, and it's well documented at docs.meraki.com. Simon, I got a couple of questions. So the first question is, when do we have a date for connecting two different firewalls will be available? I don't understand the question fully, so the person can ask through chat, through chat can maybe clarify. But if you mean that, are we going to have HA, high availability in NAT mode between two different firewalls? That today our NAT-based high availability strategy is that both MXs have to be the same model. That's the closest I could make out of that sentence. So if that was not the actual question, I apologize. When will we be able to have different third-party VPN for different networks? With this tag-based configuration that I just showed you, you can absolutely do that. You can have few MXs using one tag and talking to one specific third-party VPN, and using the different MXs under a different tag to talk to a completely different third-party peer. In fact, a tag doesn't have to have 5 MXs. A tag could be just based on a single MX. So you can have 5 MXs, each of which have a completely different third-party IP VPN settings and talking to 5 different hosts or VPN peers. What will happen when the country code is blank? That shouldn't be allowed. You should not be able to say when the country code is blank. And if the Z1 has the same country blocking, no. The country blocking, which is the geography-based firewall rules, are a part of our advanced security feature set, which is only available on the MX products. Great. So I'm running out of time. Before I pass to Simon, I want to put one plug. If you are a partner, please be on the lookout for an invitation from the Meraki team. We are going to make some exciting announcements for the partners next week. A big product announcement is coming up next week for partners. And if you are a Meraki end user, a customer, please be on the lookout for an invitation for the week after, because in the first week of February, we're going to make some really, really cool announcements. We're going to be the first in the world to announce something. So I just want to kind of put it out there, entice you guys to kind of pay attention. Something extremely cool is coming. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Simon.
Thank you very much, Dahan. You always have to be careful allowing your product manager to come into one of these presentations. Obviously, fantastic to get an update directly from the team, and that sounds like quite a tantalizing update coming up very shortly. So I hope you can join us for those, and obviously we'll keep that communicated with you. All right, so without further ado, we'll move on, and I'm going to cover the wireless update next. So this is the material that I received from the wireless product manager, which I'm going to walk you through. So first of all, we wanted to just take a moment to reflect on what we're noticing with the industry, particularly around 802.11ac. So the latest wireless standard, which takes us into gigabit performance capability for Wi-Fi. What's really been interesting about this is the speed at which it has started to gain traction in the industry. So if you think about the earlier standards that we've seen before, 802.11n, for example, that was launched a long time ago now, at least 5 years ago, and we are still seeing a vast number of devices using that. And as you can see here, 11n is still absolutely dominant. But what's really interesting here is the speed at which 11ac is starting to eat into this. Of course, we now know that most of us have got devices that have AC built in. A lot of brand new Android and Apple handsets have those built in now, and computers as well, of course. So perhaps that's the reason we're starting to see that. We just wanted to reflect on that fact. Now, to support this growth in 11ac, we have refreshed our portfolio, and fairly recently, back in just December, we announced a couple of brand new access points to really enhance our offering out to the marketplace. So for the first time, we've introduced an outdoor 802.11ac access point. That's the MR72 you can see in the lower right-hand corner. But we also introduced the MR32. Now, these are both very interesting APs. They are not they're not positioned as the absolute premium AP. That is the MR34, which has the triple stream, triple radio design. But what we have with these ones is a slightly lower price point, but some really nice functionality built in, which I'm about to show you. Before I go on to the next slide, I just wanted to point out that we still have a good, healthy portfolio of 11n access points, and we had the confidence to launch brand new 11n access points in 2014 because we do believe that 11n still has a long way to go. Think about the standards that have been with us for almost 15 years now. You still come across 802.11g in particular quite regularly, particularly in the domestic environment. So this is the lineup as it stands at this point in time, and let's have a look at the additional enhancements that have been made on the wireless side. So first of all, we introduced some brand new external antennae, and these are designed to obviously operate in very extreme environments. I didn't mention it on the previous slide, but the AC access point, the outdoor one, is able to go down to a temperature as low as -40 degrees. So it really is a very, very low temperature support indeed, and that's the same the case for the antennae that you can see here. Now note, if you're not already familiar with our outdoor APs, that they do use industry standard N-type connectors, so you're not limited to these ones that we sell. You can also attach your own antenna if you wish to do so. But perhaps one of the most interesting and exciting new development with our latest announcement with these new APs is the introduction of Bluetooth Low Energy built right inside the access point. Now, some of you may have heard about technology called iBeacons. There's been a lot of column inches covered with this in various tech journals over the past few months. Apple is obviously now adding its weight to that, which is why they put that little I in front. The industry term is actually beacons. So iBeacon is certainly part of that. It's really the same thing. It's just Apple's own trademark for their own approach. Now, what's interesting about this is the potential that it gives us for enhancing tracking of individuals, for providing really useful information both to those individuals and to potentially to organizations that want to be able to track devices. So let me walk you through a couple of scenarios here. The next slide actually takes us through the retail kind of scenario, so I'll park that for just a second. One of the things that you can do with this is to track devices very easily. So you may have seen that there are these little Bluetooth beacons that you can buy now. companies like Estimote, for example, and these run on very, very low power. So this is the great advantage that Bluetooth Low Energy brings us. These little beacons, they can run on a small sort of coin-sized battery for multiple years in some cases. So this makes it very practical to deploy these for real-world scenarios. So think about, for example, a trolley that had some very expensive equipment on it. You might find that in a hospital or in a or perhaps in an education setting. You can just attach one of these beacons to that trolley, and then you're able to track its location throughout the network. And in fact, if I just switch across to the dashboard quickly, I can show you. Let me just go back to the regular network we use. And what I'll show you on here is where we can actually see that information. All right, so head over to the wireless section. And we have now this new entry, Bluetooth clients. So when I click into here, I can now see the client devices, and these are various different types. We can see, if we look down the list here, there's a couple of Estimote tags right there. We've also got some Fitbit devices by the looks of it, which are using the Bluetooth Low Energy capability as well. So we're able to identify those and see those with these APs. I can't see on the list here. Let's just do a quick search. No, Daisy's not there. So we actually have one of the dogs in our office here is actually wearing a tag around his collar, and it's actually we're using that to help test this. So as the dog wanders around, if they go outside of the area that they're meant to be in, then we can actually have an alert set up to associate with that. So that's one side of Bluetooth Low Energy capability, but really I think perhaps the really exciting one, and we're at the early stages of this, we're expecting a lot of development in this particular area, but this slide here really depicts quite nicely how in a retail environment, for example, we could make use of this. So first of all, the APs themselves obviously have this tag built in. Now, all this tag is doing is issuing a very, very small advertisement saying, this is me, this is my unique identifier. What's really useful about this technology is that in order for it to be able to do that, it's a very low power communication signal, and it can be restricted to certain geographic areas. Now, an app on your smartphone would be able to pick up on the presence of this beacon using the Bluetooth functionality, and it would then be able to drive certain behavior on the application itself. So, for example, if you walked into a retail store that's making use of beacons, your smartphone might buzz and let you know that you're now in the vicinity of a retailer that you have an association with, in a similar way to the way we have store cards today to help build a relationship with retailers that we visit most frequently. This is a very similar kind of concept. So now you walk into a supermarket, for example, you may be welcomed, you might be told what the special offers are today, and when you're in the vicinity of certain items, then you might see a particular coupon might pop up on your phone to give you a special deal on that particular item. So this is very exciting for retailers, and it's a little bit different to the way we've done things in the past, because as a consumer, you would actually need to have this app on your phone in order to take advantage of the information that the beacon is sending out. So in other words, this is not just blanket advertising to people who don't want to receive it. This is where you as a consumer actually elect to build an association with a retailer to get some mutual benefit. It's the same kind of idea that's used for air miles and hotel points and that kind of thing. So we believe that this is a very exciting technology. I visited an event in San Francisco just last week where a number of different companies are developing very exciting projects for making use of these beacons. So we think it's a really good time to get this into our APs for our customers to benefit from. So as I said, this offers site-wide beaconing. We can also do that client inventory and location analytics. That's what I was mentioning with the tracking just now. And we can also use this for remote fleet management as well. So there's a lot of different capabilities that we could potentially work with here. And like I said, we're at the very early stages here. You're going to start to see more of this coming forwards. But what I think is interesting is that we've taken the bold step of putting these beacons right into the access point, so it's provided at no additional cost to our customer. It's just simply another radio that's built into these already very capable access points. Okay, so that's the update from the wireless side. Now let's move on to switching, and this is a fairly quick one. We have some interesting developments in switching, but they tend to be quite incremental on the switching side of things because, as I'm sure you're aware, the requirements for switching relatively straightforward, and we basically enhance the product based on the feedback we receive from you, our customers. So I'm sure I don't need to tell those of you who are on the partner side of things that the market for switches is still a very large one and is growing all of the time. Meraki now has a really healthy share of this industry, of this market altogether, because we were the first to bring cloud-managed switches to the marketplace. So that's clearly given us an edge in that particular area. Now we're seeing certain trends that are driving switch capacity and switch performance. Wireless is a great example of this. We just touched on 802.11 AC. We are obviously now therefore getting more throughput on the wireless side of things, which in turn, obviously all that traffic eventually has to go onto a switch network. So that's why our switches are able to handle both the performance but also the power requirements for these APs. Our flagship access point, for example, the MR34, operates on the higher AT power standard, which is required for certain products, things like, well, some APs, obviously security cameras, and sometimes VDI terminals as well. So all our switches that support power can drive those standards. You don't need to worry about picking the right one. We are seeing a drive in the industry towards cloud and towards unified wireless and wide management. That's really our bread and butter. That's what we do best here at Meraki. We were the leaders in this industry from the word go. So as part of Cisco, obviously, that's a very exciting part of our offering. Ease of use, we always try to maintain this, and it is an interesting one. I think the reason this has been added on here is that as we start to build out some of the features on the, particularly on the switching side of things, it really does challenge the user interface. We want to keep a straightforward, simple, intuitive user interface as much as we possibly can, but at the same time, we are putting in features that our larger customers really require, things like VRRP functionality for switch failover or OSPF for layer 3 routing. So those are really a little bit more complex, and so they do drive a little bit of a challenge for our UI designers. So what is new in the switching area? Well, first of all, we have some interesting port security enhancements. Now, we've been working on this for a period of time now. The ones that are actually new are, there's twofold. So first of all, we have introduced sticky MAC capability. So let me just go across to the dashboard and I'll show you where that gets configured. So if I go into our list of switch ports, so this is always a long list, takes a few moments to build. This is loading up information for every single switch port that we have in our entire corporate headquarters here in San Francisco. And it's well over 2,000 ports. There's a lot of detail in here. And of course, it always takes longer when you're waiting for it. There we are. So 2,312 switch ports, and you can see there's a lot of detail here. For example, we have to go off and do things like CDP and LLDP checks to identify device types. That's been in our portfolio for a long period of time now. What I'll do is I'll just take an example of just looking for a certain collection of ports. So I'm just going to just type in VoIP here, so that gives me a subset, and this is based on the tag here. So I've just done that simple search, and if I go in and edit these ports simultaneously, I just want to show you where you set up the sticky MAC. So you can play with this yourself if you have the right firmware level. So it's right here under Access Policy, and if you're not familiar with sticky MAC, the concept's quite straightforward. When you connect a device to a switch, normally it will learn the MAC address of that device. That enables the communication to flow subsequently. But the way this generally works is that the MAC listing in the database on the switch will actually age out, so it would need to be refreshed periodically. Sticky MAC enables you to basically lock this port to a specific MAC. So you plug in a device, and the first device that it sees, it's going to take that MAC address into the database, but that MAC address will then be associated with that port, so it won't be able to support any other devices that are plugged into that port subsequently until you actually go ahead and clear that. So that's a nice little security feature, particularly for ports that are placed in a public area, maybe like a reception area, for example. So that's the first one. The other one is that we're able to actually now aggregate ports together using something called a port protected mode. Now with port protected mode, the concept is, let's take the example of a hotel. You might want to have a wired port in each room of the hotel, but you're only going to want those ports to communicate with the internet. You don't want them to be able to communicate with each other. So port protected mode is going to allow you to do that. It's essentially creating miniature network segments so that you can operate in a more secure fashion. Now we've also introduced new live tools, and these are really associated with all the developments we've been making on the IP, the layer 3 side of things. So this is all pretty straightforward stuff, but it's still, if you have been using our equipment for a period of time, it's going to be useful for you to be aware of this. So let me just take you into one of our switches, and we'll have a look at that. So let's just jump into this guy here. So here is the switch. If you've not seen this view before, perhaps you're not a Meraki customer for switches at this point in time. This is the typical view that you get when you look at the switch, and it is a live view, as you can see here. But the main point that I wanted to just direct you to is the fact that we have the ability to do, let me just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to switch across to a different view that I had here. Okay, so I mentioned that these things require a specific version of firmware, and that was a good example of that. So the last network I was showing you was running a different version of firmware. This is running the appropriate one here. So we can now set a source interface, and we can actually configure and ping an IP address, which is something we were not able to do previously. That was just able to reach specific MAC addresses. So we were able to therefore get layer 3 out from the switch for troubleshooting purposes. Now obviously now that we've put layer 3 in, we're also able to see things like routing tables with IP address information built in there. Now, last but not least, this is a very exciting development. I hope you've seen this already if you're on the switching side of things. Frankly, if you're using any Meraki equipment, it doesn't have to be switches, but network topology is a very exciting development. We've all been there with designing networks and creating network diagrams, which rapidly become out of date as soon as something changes. What we decided to do is implement a real-time network topology map, which is based on information fed through the cloud. So we're able to show where devices sit in a particular environment, which is very exciting. So I'll just take the example of this actual switch we're looking at today. And you can see here we have a topology section. So if I click on show now, it's going to take me in to look at this network to see where this device sits, but also interestingly to show you the other ones which are associated with it in the vicinity. Now we've got some larger examples of this, which I was looking at earlier on. So these are quite exciting, big, large networks, and generally what you'll find if it's Meraki devices is that if you hover over those, you will actually get a hyperlink. You can see how many clients are connected to it directly, and you could actually jump directly from this hyperlink straight to that device, which makes management just that much easier. So the APs here with the little circles, again, you can just jump straight to that device from here. Now the beauty of this is it's actually being designed and the page is actually rendered in real time. So if you do have changes to make, then you will see those reflected immediately. Okay, so that's it for the switching update, and we're going to move on to the MDM update. I can see a few questions appearing on the board. I will just get through the MDM stuff, and then we'll have a look at a couple of questions before we wrap things up. So it is a very exciting time in mobile device management. We are seeing big trends occurring. These have been going on for a few years now, but they are still continuing at quite a pace. So one-to-one programs trying to ensure that every child, for example, in the education sector, has a mobile device to use during their school time, including also shared mobile device programs and shared labs. So we need to be able to dynamically reassign devices between different types of users. In the business world, we're also needing to think about secure bring your own device capability. So we've been hearing about VUID for literally years now. What MDM allows us to do is to create a secure environment where we can actually bring those devices in without them having any impact on our existing network. Now, there's so many different ways to architect this, but what we've done with Meraki is introduce a fully featured mobile device management solution to help you achieve all of this capability. Now, what's most exciting about the Meraki approach is we have actually had Systems Manager out there for just, it's actually about 2.5 years it's been out in the marketplace now, and we actually have the largest deployment of MDM software in this industry. So we have, as you can see there, we've got 22,000 networks covered, and that behind those literally will be millions of devices being covered by our mobile device management software. So this is really because we make it very easy to get started with Systems Manager, and in fact you can start working with it absolutely free of charge. So if you have a small environment, a lab environment, or even a small business you'd like to try it out with, then you can absolutely do that. You just hop along to our website at meraki.cisco.com/SM, Systems Manager, and then we can get you started. But this is a product which has been seeing a lot of evolution in the last few months in particular. And we've actually started to add some very interesting new enterprise features. So for larger customers looking to deploy, we can now scale to many, many thousands, even hundreds of thousands of end devices worldwide in a single network. So this does mean you can make changes and apply applications and settings and restrictions to very large numbers of devices simultaneously. Now, what's also exciting as a relatively recent development with MDM is the ability to tie identity into existing identity services. So things like Cisco ICE or Active Directory, we can now start to apply rules, applications, and settings to mobile devices based on the user who's actually connected to the network. So when they pick up their device, they get signed on to the network, they will be identified and given a set of rules, which is really a contained environment containing applications, settings, and restrictions. And this is really what MDM is so very good at. And as you can see, we have support for multiple platforms now. We do support Windows Phone. We have support for Windows already, Mac, Android, and even Chrome OS. So a lot of Chromebooks out there in the education sector. We do provide some MDM capability there as well. So if you're not already making use of mobile device management, then these are a few questions you might want to think about. And we didn't just pluck these questions out of the air. We actually called a couple of our customers last week. We were interested in getting some feedback around what they knew about Systems Manager prior to putting this webinar together. And these are the kinds of things that we believe it's useful for you to think about in terms of whether to deploy MDM in your own environment. Really, we all know that we're all carrying multiple smartphones, tablets, laptop computers around with us nowadays. So in order to control this environment so that not too much network infrastructure is impacted in terms of bandwidth and so on, you may want to start locking these things down, particularly if you are responsible for these devices and deploying them to your employees. So in terms of what's next, well, 2013 and 2014 we saw interesting developments. We launched the product in 2013. In 2014 we introduced the enterprise version of Systems Manager, which does have the additional functionality that I touched on the previous slide, things like the integration with the network authentication services and so on. And then in 2015 we're looking at unified endpoint management, a very exciting development, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about MDM coming up soon. I'm sure if the product manager was here right now, he'd also be doing a big selling job on that. But stay tuned, and this is the entire point with Meraki. We want to make sure that we have these quarterly updates keeping you abreast of what is current at this point in time. That is really the snapshot for our 4 portfolios for this particular quarter. Do remember, Dahan's section in particular was really nicely technically detailed. What we would like to just point out to you is that this webinar is really designed as an update for people who are already familiar with the Meraki family. We do have an extensive range of webinars where you can get yourself up to speed, and obviously very excited to bring you on board as customers as well. For our regular webinar series, we also offer free equipment for people who've never attended one of these webinars before. So if you get signed up, you can hopefully get yourself a free access point so you can start to work with Meraki. Now there are some great tools you can use on the screen here for keeping in touch with what we're doing during the course of the quarter. The blog is the one that I really would recommend you go for. If you go along to that web page, you can actually register on there on the blog, get yourself signed up, and you will then receive updates several times a week with details about incremental changes that we're making. So I do hope you found this very useful. We're interested in receiving your feedback, so please don't be shy to share that with us. But right now, what I'm going to do is just take a pause and have a look at some of the questions that have come in. We've got a few minutes left, so I'd like to just see if we've got some interesting questions to share. So first up, we have a question about coverage area for the new APs, and that is definitely a valid question. From the Wi-Fi perspective, there's really no change. So you're still going to have the same kind of 100-meter coverage in free space that you were experiencing previously. And that's a general rule with most APs. They generally offer about the same. But that 100 meters is really very optimistic if you think about the real-world environments that we put these APs in. We don't normally have the luxury of a completely empty space to fill up. We've normally got walls, we've got glass, we have people, of course, walking around, we have other Wi-Fi devices causing interference. So all of these things will have an impact. But the interesting new development with these new APs with Bluetooth built in is that Bluetooth, despite running at very low power, is actually able to cover very large areas itself. And we have found in our own testing that we get broadly similar coverage for the Bluetooth beaconing that we're achieving with the Wi-Fi signal propagation. And that's got something to do with the nature of Bluetooth technology. It's a little different to Wi-Fi, and it can therefore overcome some interference issues that can have more of an impact on Wi-Fi throughput. So I've got a question here about beacons and how you might make use of those in a construction environment. Well, you can think about the expensive tools and equipment that's used in a construction environment. Certainly you'd want to be able to keep track of that kind of thing. What you're going to need to have is devices which are carrying a beacon of their own. So there are many different companies offering these. It doesn't actually matter which one you buy. There's no particular vendor association required here. It's a standard. So you can go out and buy any beacon from any vendor, and you can start to implement it into the Meraki portfolio. So in other words, put up some APs in your construction environment, and you're going to be able to track the tags that you have going around that environment. In terms of applications, this is not something which Meraki itself does, so what we're doing is providing the infrastructure which is going to allow these applications to flourish. I've been playing with a few apps that let you try out these beacons. So one you could try out if you want to see how it works, called Shopkick. It was one word, and I found that one quite interesting just to see how beacons are starting to be implemented. We are at the fairly early stages of this technology. There are a few retailers out there that are starting to deploy these beacons, so it is something which we're expecting will pick up quite strongly during 2015. Question here whether switches can run EIGRP. They cannot, so they are not traditional Cisco switches in that sense. We are making use of dynamic routing with OSPF at this point in time. Okay, so can we export the switch topology view? You can export it in the sense that you can effectively send it to your printer. Let me just go back to the screen. So if we go over to the top here, let me see, we have the ability to do a download here, which will be a PDF format, or you can actually print it directly. So it's not compatible with existing tools like Visio, for example. Just keep that in mind. This is a tool built into the Meraki dashboard, and really it's designed to be used dynamically. So we're often asked about downloading these, but part of the point of a tool like this is that it is a real-time tool. So you go into this screen instead of looking at a piece of paper with a network diagram on it. Great question here. Do we have a limit on how many switches can be connected? And the answer to that question is I have never seen a limit myself. So there is really very large scalability in the Meraki portfolio. We have customers running as many as 10,000 devices in their networks, and they get no loss of performance because of the way in which we architect things. If you are new to this, the architecture is something very interesting about the way Meraki does business, so I strongly recommend you come along to one of our regular webinars for that. Okay, so we're just coming up towards the top of the hour now, and what I'm going to do is just wrap this up now and just give you a few minutes back. Once again, I'd just like to invite any feedback you'd like to send. In fact, I'm happy to give you my email address so you can send that feedback directly to me. It's quite an easy one to remember. It's simon@meraki.com. So if you've got any comments you'd like to make about how you think we can improve this webinar for the next quarter, then please do let us know. Very interested in hearing about that. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for your time and attention over the past hour. We've covered quite a lot of ground. Really hope you found it useful, and we will be back with another quarterly, as you can probably guess, at the beginning of quarter 2. So we very much look forward to speaking to you then. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and bye-bye for now.